Hey guys, DemonDriver here, and in the last video you saw me make the tail and rudder to our Emirates 777-9X, but in this video I'm going to make the elevator stabilizers for our Emirates 777-9X, all from scratch, all by hand. All you need is some tools, some foam, some styrofoam, some carbon fiber rods, some balsa, and time and patience, and you can make anything for your RC aircraft. Just like these stabilizer elevators for Emirates 777-9X, which we're building, and there's the tail to it. And in this video, we're going to go ahead and do that. That's what we're going to make these in this video. Alright? Alright, my friends, let's look at the parts that will make up the elevator and stabilizer of our 13-foot Emirates 777-9X. Basically, the top piece is this 3mm Depron or cell foam. That's the top. Then we have the center, okay, which is this piece of styrofoam. This is kind of the meaty center, lightweight. And then we have an all solid balsa elevator. All right, that's the elevator. All balsa. Be hinged into place. Then we have balsa leading edge. As you can see, balsa leading edge. That will go here. Then we have these really strong carbon fiber arrow bodies and some other pieces of any thick, you know, 4 to 5, 6mm hollow carbon fiber is perfect for the internal structure of our stabilizer and elevator. Or the stabilizer itself. The elevator is just balsa. It's fine. It's nice and strong. And then the underside will be made up of this 2mm Depron, gray Depron, which is stock, old stock that I had from many years ago. I will cut. That will be the underside. This is in the shape of an old airliner wing that I was using as a stencil a long time ago. But that will be used for the bottom side. So these are the things that will make up the stabilizer and elevator for our Emirates 777-9X, identical to what is on the Lufthansa 777-9X currently being built. So there's actually 3 777-9Xs being built: 1 ANA, 1 Lufthansa, 1 Emirates. All right, let's get down to the build. Let's start building. Okay, well, one of the first things we want to start off doing with making our stabilizers for our Emirates 777-9X is carbon fiber rod placement, okay? And this is pretty important here. Now, we're going to put 2 rods inside each stabilizer. But the main thing you want to make sure you do is 1 rod has to run the entire length, or pretty much run the entire length of the stabilizer. The other one doesn't have to, but the other one is there for secondary strength, but also for mounting. And one of them will run the full length. Okay. So that's key. That's really important. You always want to do that. So this is a nice long rod. So I can use this rod and cut this in half. And that's a good thing. You want to utilize your carbon fiber and use it well. And actually, this rod is so long, but. Yeah, so I'll cut this rod in half and use it, and then I've got 2 rods, so I've got 4 rods. I can make 2 rods out of this, and then I have 2 more rods, so that's 4 for the stabilizer. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to actually mark out where I want the rods to go inside the stabilizer, and that's important. Okay, the first step of assembling our stabilizers for our 777-9X is to add our carbon fiber rods, right? So we got a carbon fiber rod forward. Now obviously this won't be done the same way on each one, because one will be One is right, one is left. You understand? So one technically would be like this. You understand? And this is the bottom side. Like that, right? So one of the things you need to remember is you need to leave space in here for your basswood hinge mounting point, and we don't want to have it too far back because that would then get in the way of that. Then you couldn't add your basswood in, so you could add your hinge. So we want to make sure that it's put in a place that gives us room, but at the same time extends the carbon fiber rod the length of the stabilizer, so it gives strength and gives rigidity. That's really important. That is incredibly important. Now we got our caliper here. So mainly what I want to do is I just want to kind of get an idea of, well, we don't need this end piece anymore, so I'm gonna hack that off. I don't need that. It's just a waste. So I get rid of those. That's the arrow. That's the arrow thread on the arrow body, so it can, you know, fit into the actual string on the bow. We don't need that anymore. So I want to mainly work out where on here I want to place the rods. So I want a good amount of space. There we go. And then the forward rod, but you want them both straight, if that makes any sense. You want them both straight so that when it fits into the fuselage, it fits in, the rods going straight. If they're on angles, it's going to be really hard to get it into the balsa block, the mounting block, inside the tail section of our 777-9X, of our Emirates 777-9X. Okay, with the caliper, I go ahead and I mark off an amount of space, and I'd say right about here, yep. So one rod goes the full length. One rod will go the full length, like that. So I mark that off, like so. And that'll be the groove. Right? And then I take my ruler and I draw out where I want it to be, but I also have to make an end point as to where, because this end here will be balsa. The very tip of the stabilizer will be balsa. So I'll end it right there. And I take my marker. There we are. Alright, now I know to use my Dremel to Dremel out a groove, and I know where to do that. Now I come in with the second piece. Coming with my second piece of carbon fiber, which is a little bit thinner, and it's a square shape, but it's incredibly strong. Incredibly strong. And I come in and I pick an area as to where I want this to be, and right about here. Right about there. So I measure out how far it is from the black line, from the first black line, and then I'll mark that off. I'll take my ruler. And there we go. Now I know where the second carbon fiber rod is going to be. So by doing this, I now have my two carbon fiber rods. And that is going to give phenomenal strength to this stabilizer. And I'm going to mimic this on here, on the left stabilizer, right stabilizer, left stabilizer. So now I'm going to mimic this on that, and then we're going to start cutting out the groove so we can epoxy the rods straight into the styrofoam. Okay, now that I have the the grooves cut, or the grooves shown here for my carbon fiber rods. Let me widen this one a little bit. You always want to make the groove about maybe half a millimeter wider on each side for the groove for the actual carbon fiber rod, so that you're not jamming it into place, because sometimes that can actually cause more problems than having it, you know, fit a little bit loose, because you also want a jacket to be formed by your epoxy. So I've got a dust mask on. Go ahead and get my Dremel. As you can see, I got a steel kind of a routing bit, kind of a gouging bit at the end of that, and that just makes easy, quick work of this styrofoam. It really does. Makes easy, quick work of it. Here we go. Compressed air duster can comes in real handy. So we didn't lay our carbon fiber rod into place, and as you can see, it fits down in there perfectly. See that? Now we're going to do the same thing for the big boy, for the big long piece. Here we go. Alright, let's see if this piece will fit in. Fits in good. And the main key is you want it to be flush. You want it to fit flush. So you got your two pieces, forward and rear carbon fiber rods, really strong, man. That's the key. It gives you strength. It gives you strength, and we'll do the same on this boy, and then we'll go ahead and epoxy them into place. Okay, and now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and epoxy our carbon fiber rods into position. We got 5-minute JB Weld. This is good stuff. It's readily available at Lowe's. It's relatively inexpensive. They say it's 5-minute. Now right now it's close to 90 degrees here in South Carolina, so it will actually be 5-minute epoxy because of the heat, and that's really how this stuff works. Bob Smith, it would be 3 minutes above 90 degrees, but the JB Weld, it takes a little longer to kick. They say it's 5-minute. You know, you guys have heard me say this before. It's more like 7-minute. And when you go south of 60 degrees, add another 5 minutes, because you're just talking, the chemical reaction takes longer to happen because of the heat. And I use old spent granola bar boxes. I use old spent granola bar boxes to mix the epoxy up by hand, and then I apply it straight to where I need it. And that's what I'm going to do next. And if you're careful with how much you use, it doesn't really add it doesn't add too much weight to the piece that you're working on. So I just go ahead and pull out the rod, and I just apply it straight into the groove. Being conscious and aware of the time situation. You don't want to dilly-dally too long, because the epoxy will start to set. And then I take a little bit and I run it into and over the rod as it fits down into the groove, to give it kind of kind of a sandwich effect, so that the rod is kind of covered by the epoxy. And I run it straight into the groove. I mean, this is, this is fairly straightforward and easy. This isn't rocket science. Scratch building does not have to be super complex if you don't want it to be. So there we go. That's an adequate amount of epoxy, 5-minute epoxy. I fit that down into position. And I just go ahead and take my brush and I brush the 5-minute epoxy into, I'd say about every 3 to 4 inches. I add a nice bit, and that helps kind of get it set into position, and it gives a nice structural, it helps really bond it to the styrofoam. Then I take a piece of clear tape, like so, and I go ahead and go like that, and cover it over what I just did, and that really helps kind of get the kind of flattens out the epoxy so that we don't have bumps. All right, I'm going to do the same thing with this one. Okay, guys, we're back. Now the carbon fiber rods are now set in position on the bottom side of the styrofoam stabilizer here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add our 3mm Depron upper surface. So we got right here 5-minute epoxy that I just quickly mix up. The nice thing is today it's nice and hot and humid here in sunny South Carolina, and that means that the epoxy, your 5-minute epoxy, will set a little faster. So you gotta hustle. Epoxy, 2-part epoxies work through them both combining to one, and then they heat up and they set, and that's how they work. So you gotta move quickly. So I take a nice big brush and I apply it right to the surface that the Depron is going to fit onto, and I just gently take this brush and apply it to the styrofoam, because then we're going to go ahead and add this Depron piece, and that it gives us a nice smooth surface that we can then laminate and then paint, and that's kind of what we want to do here. We want to, and then of course we're going to add our balsa leading edge to the stabilizer, and that is going to be the balsa outer edge and leading edge, and that's going to be a big step in this build. Very similar to what we did with the rudder tail. Very almost identical to the same technique. So I go ahead, I've applied the 5-minute epoxy, and I go ahead and I now add the 3mm Depron upper surface. And you line it up the best you can, get it all lined up properly, and then what you do is you come in with weights like this, and you weigh that down. I got to get a third weight there. An inexpensive weight that you guys can make at home if you so choose. I use old batteries, old cordless drill batteries, but something you can do is you can take a jar of something. You can take an old jar, this is like an old mayonnaise jar, and you can use that. You just fill it with water, and it has weight to it now, and you can use that to weigh things down. So that's what you do when you want to weigh something down. So I'll let that set. 7 minutes, 8 minutes, that'll be completely set. And then I'll do the same thing with this one. Pretty straightforward. Okay guys, the next big step after we've added our 3mm Depron upper surface to the stabilizers of our Emirates 777-9X is to add our Balsa Aerodynamic leading edge. See, we have a Balsa Aerodynamic leading edge, and we're going to add that. We're going to remove a section off of this stabilizer, and we're going to add this Balsa one. So that's what we're going to do now. The first thing we do is this is very similar to, again, what I did with the rudder. There's a lot of similarities between a rudder tail and your stabilizers, except your stabilizers, there's two of them. So let's go ahead and we take our caliper and we measure the width, or should I say how long it is, or the root of the piece of balsa. Then we apply that. This is what we're going to cut away from here. And then what we do is we put this down over this, and take a pen. What? Who is making all that noise? What is that? You guys can. So I got to mark off basically mark off what I want to cut away from the leading edge that will be replaced by the balsa. So I take my ruler and I go ahead and I mark that off. Just like so. And that's what's going to be cut away. And then I'm going to cut away this portion here, and that will be the outer portion. I'll use a piece like this out here. See this? There'll be a piece out here cut away as well. Matter of fact, why don't I do that now? Let me get that ready. So let me take a measurement of this piece, and it's the same. So what I do is then I come in like I just did, and I mark off what has to be cut away. There we are. Now I know what to cut away from that piece. Alright, now what I'm going to do is I'm mixing up epoxy, 2-part epoxy, and what I'm going to basically do is I'm going to start applying I'm going to actually add the balsa leading edge to the stabilizer of my Emirates 777-9X. Let's go ahead and get a brush out here. Gonna mix. Mix up our epoxy. 5-minute JB Weld epoxy does the job well. Does a very good job. Excellent stuff. I love using it. So we're going to use a couple of pins. We're going to use some pins, and we're going to actually pin. We're going to pin this new piece of balsa to our right to the stabilizer. So we go ahead and we got our pins over here. Let's get a couple pins pre-positioned. I'll put a pin right over here, get it ready. And the pins basically help keep it into position. Once it's in place, the pins, they kind of ensure that it's not going anywhere once you place it where you want it. So I'm going to just go ahead and gently apply the 5-minute right to the balsa leading edge. Very similar again with what I did with the tail rudder for this plane. It's a very similar procedure. And as you can see, the way I build is very straightforward. It's not very complex, and it's incredibly lightweight. I like how I do it, but of course I'm always learning, I'm always trying new things, always trying new materials, but also I do what works. I use the techniques that work. And that's important if you want to have successfully flying RC aircraft. You want to do stuff that works, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel sometimes, and you come up with stuff that doesn't work. And you waste a lot of money in the process. So I go ahead and apply the balsa leading edge straight to the, and I pin it here. I go ahead and run my pin. I run my pin right on in. Look at that, I didn't even make that up. Run the pin right on in. And I run it right into here like so. There we go. Perfect. And right here I'm going to add a piece of tape to keep the... Alright, we've got all of our balsa leading edges on the right and left stabilizers for our Emirates 777-9X. That's completed. Now what I'm going to start doing is kind of some preliminary work here, and that is to slowly begin to shape this piece here, this stabilizer root, which then leads to the fuselage. So I'm going to take a razor and just slowly begin to contour it very slowly and very gently, and start to kind of shape it to match the curvature and bend of the ball, because this will be maintained. I'll just sand this down and then laminate it to make it hard, so that we have a nice hard piece that will, that'll be nice and resistant, ding resistant and tough, and be aerodynamic. And then I'll do the same thing here. I'll go ahead and just gently shape it with a razor, very gently, very slowly. Then I'll come in later with the sanding block and some sanding pads and get that sanded. So there we go. So the next step is I'm going to begin to add in our hinge, our Basswood hinge mounts for our elevator, our balsa elevator. That's the next step. Hey guys, DemonDriver here. We're back on our build video for our stabilizers and elevators of our Emirates 777-9X, our giant 13-foot beast. What we have here is the right and left stabilizers with the balsa elevators. Now, in this portion of our build video, what we're going to be doing is mounting in our Basswood elevator mounts, okay, that the balsa elevator is going, that the hinges for the balsa elevator are going to fit into. And what we're going to do is we're going to gouge out the areas where they're going to fit into, so that we can put our heavy-duty Dubro Teflon nylon hinge into. And that's what we're going to do right now. Okay, so what we're going to be doing in this video, or shall I say, this segment, is we're going to go ahead and add the basswood in. Now, What is yet to be added is the 3mm, or excuse me, 2mm gray Depron bottom piece. I haven't added that yet. I don't like to add that till more towards the end because I like to keep this open so I can make the elevator control servo compartment. I'll cut that out. So I like to keep that open until I really kind of know where I want to place that. So what I do is I take a caliper and I go ahead and measure out the width of the Depron that we're going to use. Now I'm not using, that's just a piece that's an example. But what I do is I go ahead and basically add that here, and I get an idea for how much further the Depron would extend, and then I can get kind of a center point as to where I want to add these Basswood mounting tabs. Okay? And you also want to place the mounting tabs in a key position to where the stress is equally kind of distributed, and the mounting points, you don't want the hinges all the way at the ends, because then you're going to get, you could get bowing, you could get flex in the center. You don't want that. Now, if this was a little bit longer of a control surface, then I would have 3. But you don't need that, because with a heavy-duty Dubro hinge, nylon hinge, you just don't need it. It's not necessary. So 2 will do perfectly. Now, of course, if you have your hinge points too close in, you have the problem where if these are too far in and they're too close to each other, you have the problem of this. You'll have flutter this way. So you don't want that. So you want to place them sort of kind of equally distanced, like that. Something close to that. Maybe this one just a tad further in. You see? That's kind of what you want. As a matter of fact, that's so good, I'm going to go ahead and mark that off with a marker. As to where I want them to be placed. Alright? And then I take the right stabilizer and do the same thing. Because you want everything to be uniform when you scratch build. Especially when you have the same, a right and a left, you want it all to be standardized and uniformed, and you want to mimic what's on the right, what's on the left. Unless there's something that's on the right that's not on the left, like like God forbid if you were building the night fighter variant of the, you know, the Hellcat, Grumman Hellcat, where it had the radar, you know, it had the radar pod out on the right wing. Well, you didn't have one on the left wing, you just had one on one side. See, some aircraft, they have one thing that's on one side, but they don't have the same thing on the other side. Sometimes those are antennas, radar, a missile jamming pod. Usually those are warbirds. I can't think of an airliner that has one thing on one side but not something on the other. You're not going to see a winglet on one side and no winglet on the other. You're not going to see that. So everything is usually mimicked for balancing and weight distribution. Alright, so let's go ahead and let's mark off the areas where these are going to go. Let's create our little our areas. Let's mark out the areas that we want to cut out with our Dremel. Okay, I've marked off the areas on the right and left stabilizers to where I want to cut out the areas where we want to add our Basswood hinge mounts. That's next. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and get my little dust mask on. And we got our Dremel ready to rock. Alright, let's go ahead and let's start dremeling out the area where we want these pieces to fit into place. That was pretty easy. Let's go ahead and clean that out. And see, and that fits in there just like that. Fits in there nice and neat. There we are, and then we'll put epoxy in there, and that'll be fitted into place. And we'll just do the other one too. There we are. Just like that. See that? And now I'll do the same thing on this one. And then after that, I'll epoxy these into place. It's that simple. It really is that simple, folks. It's dug out, I just apply some 5-minute epoxy straight to the hole, like so. And I pop the Basswood hinge mount straight into position, just like that. And I just place epoxy down and in around it, and that will situate this right into position. Now, you would say, would this just whole area tear out of this styrofoam like this? And I have yet to see that happen. When this whole structure is together and everything is all the, you know, the carbon fiber and the Depron and everything, and it's all kind of made into one solid piece, it's remarkably strong and solid. So these will stay in position. And normally if it fails and this stuff breaks apart, it's normally because you've, you know, God forbid, you've you've had a you know what, starts with a C and an R and a yeah. It's not because these things just fall out on their own. They really don't. You know, years and years of doing this, you start to learn very quickly what works and what doesn't. You kind of get a knack for what is a successful build technique and what isn't. It's all trial and error. You see what works for other builders and you see what doesn't. I've had things that, you know, turn into dead ends, and then you have to go back in and fix them and make them better, improve them, whatever. So I got some epoxy in there. I'm gonna let that set and let those set in position. Okay, now what I'm going to do is, now that the spackle's been smoothed down on that side, as I got my Depron sheet here for the lower covering of our Emirates 777 stabilizer. So I got to place this actually directly over Depron, and I take an old battery like this, and I place it over top to kind of weigh it down a little bit, and I position it just a certain way, just like so. And I take a pen, and I just take the pen and I actually mark off straight onto the Depron the actual imprint or an actual tracing of the stabilizer itself. Just like that. See? And then what I have is I pick that up, and there we go. I got an exact. So this is the left one. So I put left on there so I know which one is which. Then I go ahead and have that, and then I cut it out. Take a razor. Go ahead and take my razor. And very carefully cut along the line that I made. This is the bottom portion right there. It meets the fuselage. And then I have right here outer piece, the outer cut. There we go. Go ahead. There we are. And there we have it. This then fits on here. And that covers up the bottom of that. And then we have a nice bottom surface there. And I just breathed in a mosquito. That is really irritating and disgusting all at the same time. But yeah, I got to put on some more bug spray. It's getting crazy. But see, that's the bottom piece of our Depron on our stabilizer. And I'll just do the same thing with the right one. Same thing. Okay. I've got the two right and left stabilizers with their 5-minute epoxy and the 2mm Depron sandwiched with weight on top, and about 10 minutes that should be good to go. And the next step, we'll go ahead and Dremel out the slots for our elevator hinge slots. Okay, so after we did some sanding, we got a nice tapered aerodynamic edge right there. And as you can see, let's put our elevator back into position. And I'll show you what we got and show you why we just did what we did. See? It gives us a nice tapered aerodynamic surface and airfoil, and that cuts down drag by doing that. Now, we need to clean things up a little bit for both of these, for the right and left stabilizer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going ahead and get a sanding block and do some finishing sanding. Get my dust mask and do some finishing sanding that the belt sander really can't do, because the belt sander will get you 90% the way there, or 80% the way there. Then when you want to just do some fine sanding, that's when you bring in the hand sander, and then you can clean things up and make things exactly the way you want them. And that's what we're doing right now. Getting everything nice and sanded, and then whatever idiosyncrasies and whatever little indiscrepancies or little problems we find, we'll get the spackle out and then we'll smooth that over and clean that up, and then give it one last sanding, and that will that'll really give us something perfect. And there we are, look at that. Alright, I'll hit this with a little bit of spackle and then let that dry. Okay, so after we did some sanding, we got a nice tapered aerodynamic edge right there. And as you can see, let's put our elevator back into position. And I'll show you what we got and show you why we just did what we did. See? It gives us a nice tapered aerodynamic surface and airfoil, and that cuts down drag by doing that. Now, we need to clean things up a little bit for both of these, for the right and left stabilizer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going ahead and get a sanding block and do some finishing sanding. Get my dust mask and do some finishing sanding that the belt sander really can't do, because the belt sander will get you 90% the way there, or 80% the way there. Then when you want to just do some fine sanding, that's when you bring in the hand sander, and then you can clean things up and make things exactly the way you want them. And that's what we're doing right now. Getting everything nice and sanded, and then whatever idiosyncrasies and whatever little indiscrepancies or little problems we find, we'll get the spackle out and then we'll smooth that over and clean that up, and then give it one last sanding, and that will that'll really give us something perfect. And there we are, look at that. Alright, I'll hit this with a little bit of spackle and then let that dry. Okay. I got the hinges in place. Let the epoxy set, and then we're on to the next step, and that is we'll Dremel out the slots where the heavy-duty Dubro hinges will then fit into place, and that will attach that piece to our balsa elevator. Okay, my friends, we are back, and what we're going to do right now is we've gone ahead and epoxied our Basswood hinge mounts into place into our stabilizer of our Emirates 777-9X, but the next thing we need to do is spackle in any areas in there and smooth that over completely. And as a matter of fact, we'll do that to this whole area here. But before I do that, I need to mark off here and here where the hinge is, so that way there's no way I'm going to lose sight of where the hinge is on here. That's very important. See? I get some lightweight spackle. I just go ahead and, with a trowel, I just very gently spackle it straight. Right on there. Just like that. Matter of fact, I'm going to spackle any areas that I feel need it on the stabilizer portion. And then I can smooth it down and get rid of any irregularities. right here at the tip. Get a little bit in there, and then I'll go ahead and smooth that out later on. Right in here. Okay guys, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sand down the spackle that I spackled on the back side of the stabilizer, and these are the elevator mounting tabs of Basswood. Now, they've been epoxied into position and the spackle is dried, so now I need to sand this down smooth. So I'm going to get, let's see what we got here. Got some various sanding blocks right here. I got 160. The lower the number, the higher the grit, or the more grit there is. Right here, this is about 120. Sanding sheet wrapped around a sanding block, and I got a foam block here. So I'm going to start sanding down the backside of the elevators. Before that, man, I gotta put some I gotta put on some insect repellent. Man, these mosquitoes are crazy. Okay guys, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sand down the spackle that I spackled on the back side of the stabilizer, and these are the elevator mounting tabs of Basswood. Now, they've been epoxied into position and the spackle is dried, so now I need to sand this down smooth. So I'm going to get, let's see what we got here. Got some various sanding blocks right here. I got 160. The lower the number, the higher the grit, or the more grit there is. Right here, this is about 120. Sanding sheet wrapped around a sanding block, and I got a foam block here. So I'm going to start sanding down the backside of the elevators. Before that, man, I gotta put some I gotta put on some insect repellent. Man, these mosquitoes are crazy. Okay, I just start gently sanding. Just gently sanding, very gentle. Anytime you're sanding styrofoam, you just want to be as careful as you can so you don't rip more styrofoam out of the surface. So you just got to be patient and careful. Nice and easy. So we're not done with the spackle. We have another thing to do with the spackle. I'll show you that in a minute. But see, what this is going to give us a nice smooth back surface in this area here where the elevator is going to fit into, the Balsa elevator. Now, later this is going to be tapered down. This trailing edge back here of the stabilizer will be sanded down into an aerodynamic shape. Okay, just when you thought that we were done with the spackle, we're not. See, even though these carbon fiber rods have been epoxied into position and they're secure pretty much, we still have little areas and gaps between the carbon fiber rod and the wall of the styrofoam. So in order to create a situation where you can't get these rods slowly working themselves free, what I tend to do is I'll fill these gaps in with lightweight spackle, the same spackle that we just sanded away. Now by doing that, that will really prevent any kind of vibration or movement. Even though these are epoxied into position, we still want to get rid of these gaps and fill them in. So I'm going to take my trowel and spackle, and I just start gently spackling in. Even though I'm going to have 2 or 3 millimeter Depron skin on the bottom side, I'm still going to spackle in these areas here and make things nice and uniform. And I don't need my dust mask on anymore, sorry about that. There we go. And I press the spackle down into the crevice, into the cracks in between the carbon fiber rod and the epoxy. And then I'll come in later on down the road and I'll sand all of the spackle smooth. There we are, and then I'll do the same thing. I'll do the same thing to the right stabilizer. Sometimes this kind of scratch building can be repetitive work, but it is very fulfilling in the end when you have a finished RC airplane flying over your head. There we go. Perfect. I'll do the same thing on that one. Okay, now what I've done is I've gone ahead and taken a pen and this ruler, and I marked off here and here and here and here where the hinge slots are to be cut. So now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and cut in the hinge slots on the stabilizer part. Go ahead and get my dust mask. All you need is a basic dust mask for this portion. And then I go ahead and get my Dremel, my rotary carbon fiber rotary easy lock cutter. And then I go ahead and proceed to cut. Okay, so after we did some sanding, we got a nice tapered aerodynamic edge right there. And as you can see, let's put our elevator back into position. And I'll show you what we got and show you why we just did what we did. See? It gives us a nice tapered aerodynamic surface and airfoil, and that cuts down drag by doing that. Now we need to clean things up a little bit for both of these, for the right and left stabilizer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going ahead and get a sanding block and do some finishing sanding. Get my dust mask and do some finishing sanding that the belt sander really can't do, because the belt sander will get you 90% the way there, or 80% the way there. Then when you want to just do some fine sanding, that's when you bring in the hand sander, and then you can clean things up and make things exactly the way you want them. And that's what we're doing right now. Getting everything nice and sanded, and then whatever idiosyncrasies. Alright, there we go. Got the left-hand side finished, right-hand side finished. Now, of course, this has to be laminated, painted. Same thing with this, but for mounting purposes, and then we have to put our screw in, our mounting screws. But we are in good shape here. This is really good. This is working out here. This is what I like to see. Okay, now I'm going to apply some Mod Podge to the stabilizers themselves. I've gone ahead and added the shellac. Shellacked them down, added a little bit of the polyurethane coating, and now they have a nice coating to them. So now I can go from those to the Mod Podge, and I go ahead and I just start brushing it straight on. And the good thing about Mod Podge is you can go basically over every, whether it's balsa, foam, it's foam safe, so it's not going to hurt the foam itself. So is all the sprays, the Mod Podge and the the shellac and the Minwax or the polyurethane coating. None of the things are detrimental to the Depron or Styrofoam or even the balsa. So I just apply this straight to it. And again, it creates kind of a uniform surface. It makes the balsa and the Depron basically all one. So they all blend in. Once you paint them, you don't know where the balsa begins or the Depron ends, or vice versa. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. So apply a good, healthy coat. And the other good thing about Mod Podge is that the brush strokes go away as it dries. That's the other cool thing about Mod Podge. And as you can see, I covered up the hinges with painter's tape, with masking tape. And one of the other things you got to be careful of is insects. You don't want to be doing this. I mean, right now I got a little fly hanging around, so you gotta watch that. Because if an insect, a mosquito or something gets stuck in the Mod Podge, you gotta quickly pick it out with the brush so it doesn't dry into the surface, because then you got to pick the carcass of the bug out of whatever you just painted and coated, and sometimes you get a leg or a wing stuck in the paint. So sometimes that can be a real pain in the ass. So you gotta be careful of that. Gotta be ever watchful of the wayward insect. So I'm going to just keep brushing these down and then let them dry.